Welcome to the Immigrant Entrepreneurs Podcast, episode 41.
And I remember during summer when we were on summer vacation, we went to that little house outside of the city called Dacha. And we never used cars, it was just bikes. I think it took us maybe hour and a half biking to that place. So you can imagine, so it's either you're walking, you're taking public transportation, or you're biking somewhere.
My name is Alina Warwick, and today we have Igor Kransykh on the show. Igor's entrepreneurial path had several stops along the way. He created different businesses, and a lot of them didn't work. One of them was actually a dating website. Not only is he a college dropout, he is completely self-taught in the software industry. His company, PowerSync, was only a side hustle started merely by accident. His side hustle grew all organically, and it kept on growing and growing without much of any advertising. At one point in time, before taking his side hustle full time, he wanted to sell the business, only because he couldn't handle the inbound leads and all the traction it was getting. Now his company serves clients in 17 different countries around the world. So let's dive right in and hear all about his journey and how he's running a $1 million company. All right, Igor, thank you so much for coming on the Immigrant Entrepreneurs Podcast. I truly appreciate your time, and I'm super excited to hear all about your journey. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, and I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So let's talk about your immigrant journey. Tell us where you're from and when did you come to the United States?
Sure. So I was born in a city called Dubna, next to Moscow. I think it's about under 100 miles away from Moscow. A very, very small city. I think when I was living there, the population was only about 60,000 people. And I think right now they're up to 70,000. So anyways, very small city.
It's a growing town.
It's a growing town, yes. But that city it's kind of well known within the scientist community. There is a junior nuclear research facility there. That's where my dad worked.
Wow.
I think at one point it even was a closed city, so you had to have special permission to get into.
Wow.
But anyways, I lived there for almost 17 years, and I left in 1997. My dad basically said that we have a lot more opportunity in the United States. He actually did a couple of contractor gigs over in US before we moved. And when we moved, he was offered a contract job for 3 years, moving to California, working for Stanford. And there is a Stanford Linear Accelerator Collider or something like that, some scientist center over there in California. And we moved in 1997 on April 1st. So that was kind of funny and interesting. April Fool's Day, right? I was joking with my younger sister when we landed. I was like, hey, Dad, nice joke. Let's go back. But
And you said you were 17 years old?
I was 17 years old, yes.
Okay. And did your dad have any savings when you guys were moving out here?
I wouldn't call it savings. I think what he ended up doing, if I remember correctly, he just basically sold everything that he had, like a car, a garage, whatever else we had. And we took that cash and he took it with him. So, but I don't think it was enough to buy a car here. I'll put it that way.
Okay. Awesome. Great. Okay. So tell me, what was it like growing up in Russia?
I have pleasant memories. And it's kind of funny. After we moved, I remember a conversation that I had with my mom. Initially, I was so, I don't want to say depressed, but I was so upset that I left all my friends back there. And I was saying it was so much fun. It was exciting to live there. And my mom told me oh, you were not an adult. You were not seeing a lot of the stuff that was happening back there. Mm-hmm. So I don't remember any of that negativity. But to me, as I mentioned, it was a very small city. We had a lot of public transportation. Not a lot of people had cars. I think having a car was a luxury. So, and I remember during summer when we were on summer vacation, we went to that little house outside of the city called Dacha. And we never used cars. It was just bikes. I think it took us maybe hour and a half biking to that place. So you can imagine, so it's either you're walking, you're taking public transportation, or you're biking somewhere.
sounds exactly where I'm from. So yes.
You can relate. So, and outside of that, I remember as I was growing up, there was so much public land, and that's kind of like one big difference that I remember. Like when I came to United States, people were telling me like, well, you can't go here, it's private property. You can't go there, it's private property, And I was just like, that is so ridiculous, because me growing up, if you wanted to go to the forest and camp, you just go. Like, you don't need permission, you don't need license to fish, you don't need to do anything like that. So like everything was open. It's good and bad. Good because as a kid I got a chance to explore a lot of different things and hang out in places where I probably shouldn't have hung out. But at least I'm glad I kind of lived through that, survived, for lack of a better word. But it was
Yeah.
exciting. It was exciting.
So did both of your parents work?
Initially, yes. I think when I was a kid, my mom still worked. But when my sister was born, I think my mom, she was basically staying at home mom, and my dad was the only one who had basically went to work.
Got it. Okay. And you said your dad was a scientist, right?
Yes, he's a nuclear scientist. He
Okay.
works on
Wow.
accelerators.
So tell me a little bit about the struggles that you had to go through when you first immigrated. And did you know any English when you landed on April 1st?
Man, that's a good question. Like, yes, I could read, and I did take classes in Russia, English classes. I also took a little bit of German, but little that I knew when I came here, there was kind of two big issues. One is I realized that the English that I learned in high school, or the classes that I took, they were like British English rather than English English. So there were some
Mhm.
differences there. And obviously, the dialect or communication was very difficult. Like, it took me a while to kind of process what people were saying because everyone talks so fast.
Mhm.
And kind of, if you lived in another country, you can probably relate. Like, you listen to what the other person is saying, then you're trying to process it in your mind, you're trying to translate it in your own language and make sense of it. And then when you need to respond back, you go like backwards in the same process. You like formulate what you want to say, translate it from like Russian to English, and then you try to say it. So it's like huge delay, right, in conversation. So that was a big kind of struggle. Another one, obviously, when you move, you leave all your kind of colleagues, friends behind. So I didn't know anybody when I went to school. Luckily, though, in at school that I went to, there was another guy who spoke Russian. He was from Belarus. I don't know exactly when he moved, but he was kind of my age. So we met and clicked and became friends. So that helped me a little bit. But I do want to tell you an interesting story. So, like, when I moved to US, I remember my dad took me to the high school so that, I can meet the principal and like we can register or whatever. And that was just a couple of months before end of junior year. And I was basically told, like, all right, so you have to select 5 classes. I think 2 of them were mandatory, and the other 3 you had to pick whatever you wanted.
Yeah.
So I had to take English. I think the second one was economics that I had to take. And the other 3, I did not know what to take,
Uh-huh.
because like they were suggesting, well, take literature or take like chemistry or whatever. So I basically decided to take the classes that I took the most in Russia. And back then, so in 11th grade, I already was like, I think at ninth grade, you split where you have either a scientist type of a direction or like language direction. And when you do like science direction, you take a lot more like math classes, physics, chemistry, and all of that science, right?
Mhm.
So, and that's what I did. I was like, well, English classes are going to be difficult by themselves, but I think I should be good with like math and physics because formulas are the same. Like, even though that I don't know how to pronounce some of the terms and stuff, but I could
Yeah.
still like solve problems. So that should be pretty easy for me to kind of get it acclimated to this new language, new environment. So I said, all right, so I'm going to take math, physics, and computer science, or I think it was actually 6 classes. And then the last one was chemistry. And I remember like how the person who was taking notes or like register me for those, so she was like looked at me and she's saying like, this is your junior year. There's only like, I just want to say there's a couple of months left. You're taking 4 science classes at the end of the junior year. Usually people take 1 science class. Are you sure you want to do it? So I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So like we registered. And the interesting thing was that when I actually started going to those classes, I realized that the material that they were teaching in those classes was the material that I learned like 3 or 4 years ago in Russia. So it was like very easy for me to get into. And it's kind of interesting. That observation is interesting how kind of different the educational system is between two countries.
Yeah. So different. So
Mhm.
different. And especially in Asian countries, I think the kids are in school for like 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. I mean, it's crazy how different the American education system is. We're so behind. And you're showing proven facts that 3 years ago you already took all these classes and then in junior year they're freaking out because they think that you're not going to be able to handle it. So, what an amazing story. Thank you. So, did you guys have any family or friends at all when you guys moved to California?
My dad had, I don't know, like maybe like coworkers that lived here and kind of who showed him around, but I wouldn't say like we had friends. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
my sister or me or my mom, we didn't have anybody. My dad had a few kind of acquaintances that he could like call and get advice from.
hmm So, how was the transition on finding an apartment or a house? Was that situated through your dad's work?
We actually got pretty lucky because one of the people that worked with my dad, he had a rental house. And when we moved, I think like the first couple of weeks we spent at the hotel. And after 2 weeks, we rented a house from my dad's acquaintance, so to speak. So we just rented their house. And we were renting that house for a few years until my dad kind of saved up and we were able to buy our own house.
Mm. Okay, got it. And what about transportation? Did you guys use public transportation or did you guys buy a car?
I'm trying to remember. So my dad did buy a car eventually. I just don't remember if it was like right away. I think it was within the first year. And I think he bought like a very used old car just to kind of make sure he can get to work. But none of us, like my mom, my sister, or me, we didn't have a car. Well, and I was 17. So my sister couldn't drive. She's younger. But yeah, I didn't have a car until much later.
And what about your mom? Did she know English? Did she get a job or was she a stay at home mom?
Stay at home. So she did not know any English at all. So my dad knew a little bit, obviously, since he made few trips to United States. But yeah, she stayed at home. My mom stayed at home.
Nice, nice, awesome. Okay, Igor, before you tell our listeners about your company, tell me a little bit about the path you took. And did you try to go into any other fields before starting your business?
Yes. So it's kind of interesting. So I've actually started or tried to start several businesses
Oh,
until I kind of landed on what I'm doing today. And it's kind of interesting because I've always wanted to do something on my own or wanted to start a business or like I kind of have this entrepreneurial spirit, I guess, from early ages. And maybe it's because my dad always, like, as I was growing up, he kept telling me that ask me a lot of why question, why this, why that. And through those why questions, I guess he prepared or positioned me to always try to find ways to solve certain problems that I encounter and things like that. So, anyways, the very first business that I started was, I think it was called like B List for business listing. And the idea was to create a website, something like to replace Yellow Pages. So, like where businesses could list their kind of profile, talk about their business, people could leave reviews and things like that.
something like Yelp?
Something like Yelp. I
Okay.
think it was like way before Yelp. But when I created it, the marketing approach that I used is I tried to advertise it on Craigslist. And they told me, like, hey, you can't do this. and, so since outside of Craigslist, I couldn't figure out how to market it per se, because like I'm a developer, so I'm a techie, and marketing and sales never been my strength, and especially early on. So and since I couldn't market it at all, I just kind of left it out there and then eventually turned it off. Then at one when I was more in like teenage years, I was like, maybe I should build a dating website. So I try to do that, build a dating website, also try to kind of advertise it. Nobody was visiting it, but like the people that did visit, there, like I think I had like up to 100 profiles that were created. And I don't remember why I stopped kind of growing that, but maybe I just got bored. Or maybe I found a girlfriend back then. I'm not really sure. So that kind of stopped, that business kind of got shut down there. Then when I was in college, a friend of mine from community college, we basically decided that we're going to start a business building website. So we opened the company, and essentially he was kind of handling more operational and sales, and I was actually building stuff. So we've done that for maybe like a year or two. And then I think that he had like a change in life or something like that, or maybe he had like babies or something like that. But anyways, his time kind of started to shrink that he could spend on the business. And during that time, I realized that if I were to pick up the ball and do everything, that will take a lot of my time. I'll need to learn, but I wasn't sure if I'll be doing a good job. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to get a part-time job while kind of trying to make sense of this business and grow it further. And the part-time job that I got, I worked at that company for about 6 months, and they basically told me, we need you full time. Here's the salary. Here's everything that we can offer you. And at that point, I was like, my God, like, I don't think I'll be able to generate this much revenue through the business, kind of learning all of this stuff. So I just kind of shifted to corporate career.
Okay, Igor, I'm sorry. And what was that business that you started with your partner?
Tech and web.
And what is that? What is that about?
So we were just building websites, essentially.
Oh, got it. Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you shut that one down too.
I didn't shut it down. It was like I kept it kind of running, but I never, like, I was basically not working with it. Like, the name was there registered, right? But like, I wasn't taking any new clients or anything like that. I was focused on my corporate career at that point.
And what did you study in college?
The first degree that I kind of went for was computer science.
Okay.
And then I took all of the kind of science classes, started to do general education, then decided, you know what, general education is kind of boring. Let me kind of choose the second major, which was graphic design or digital design. Did all of the preliminary classes too without GE. And about that time, I got sucked into the corporate life. So
you dropped out of college.
I dropped out of college. I don't have a degree. That's right.
Okay. Awesome. Great. I love it. College is not for everyone.
Yeah, well, and it's kind of interesting too, because I did the corporate life for a little bit. Then my dad, he has a doctor's degree, and he was like, what are you doing? You should go back to school, and etc. So I try to go back, and the classes that I was taking, there were so far behind of what I've learned all by myself or working for companies, that to me, it just turned me down, because I was like, well, if I'll spend a year or two getting a degree, I'll have to relearn all of this stuff. The technology is evolving so quickly that to me, it just didn't make any sense, unfortunately. So I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to keep working, learning on my own. I'm self-taught pretty much on everything that I know today. And
Okay.
it worked out so far.
Yeah. So tell me, what were the corporate jobs that you had? What field did you go into?
Yeah, so I started off as a developer. So I'll tell you a little bit of a story kind of leading to it.
Okay.
When I was little, my dad worked pretty much like weekends and stuff when we were in Russia. So I think at one point my mom told him that, hey, take both kids to work with you so she can maybe get some rest or whatever. And when he took us to his work, he basically said, like, listen, like, I need to do some stuff. He pointed us to where his desk was, and there was like a very, very old computer sitting there. He was like, here's a computer. It has some games on it. You two play and I'll be back. And he like went and did his thing. So that's kind of was the first time I was introduced to computers. I was just playing games while my dad was working. And when I went to high school, a friend of mine in my class, he basically said that a guy that he knows built a web page, and the web page is something that people can see. Anybody in the world can see it. And that blew my mind. And I was like, well, can you give me that link? I want to take a look at that page. So when I got that link, I started to look at the actual file of how that page was constructed. And like at that point, the page was very basic, just text, some images and things like that. So I basically started to look at that file and kind of with trial and error, kind of reverse engineered what the HTML was. Like, I didn't have any books back then to
Wow.
And that's where my passion for websites was born. And like kind of essentially started as a front-end developer early on, like starting from high school. So to answer your question about the corporate life, I was essentially a front-end developer, learned back-end development over my corporate career too. But again, I spent years and years doing just development work. And when my wife and I relocated to Austin around that time, I had a boss that I was working for, and he was a design director. And he taught me quite a bit about design and user experience. and I developed a passion for user experience. So I spent maybe 7 or 8 years doing user experience. And from there, I kind of generalized myself, so to speak. I could do UX, I could do development, I knew infrastructure. So basically anything and everything technical web related.
And what is user experience?
User experience basically helps you build or improve applications to make them more usable. So, like, think Apple phone, right? What Steve Jobs did is he didn't invent a phone, right? Phones were already there. He just made a phone different and he made it so usable that anybody without any technical background can use it and get so addicted to that phone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where user experience comes in, is just usability, right? How easy is it to use things?
Got it. Got it. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So you basically developed that you can do user experience, front end development, back end development. And this, you've
Yeah.
been there for the last company for 7 or 8 years, right?
Yeah, so I did UX for about 7 or 8 years. And after that, so I did UX for a company called Court. They did furniture rental, it was a relocation business company. And for them, I helped them build an e-commerce website first, and then I kind of transitioned into UX. And when I left Court, I actually went to work for a company called Magento. I don't know if you know them, but Magento is an e-commerce platform. Like, I've implemented basically an e-commerce platform using Magento for the previous company. And I love that platform so much that I said, you know what, one day I want to work for that company. And like within, I think, 4 months, me thinking that, I've heard that eBay acquired Magento and they're opening an office in Austin. And I was like, this is a sign. I'm going to go and apply. So I went, applied, I got a job, and I essentially went back to development from there. And I was on the development team for a year. And then UX director, I think, discovered me there, and I moved to the user experience team. So I spent, again, a year or so on the user experience team at Magento. And after my boss left, I ended up leaving too. I worked for GM for a couple of years after that. And I was managing all of their branded websites like ChevyBuick.com and things like that. I had a global team there.
Sorry to interrupt. Magento, is it similar to Shopify?
Yes, it is. It's a competitor to Shopify. And Shopify, I would say, is like, if you're just starting your business, it's a great platform for you to get onto, to build your store. But as your business grows, believe it or not, Shopify is very limited in terms of what you can do there. And usually people graduate from Shopify and move to other more enterprise level solutions like Magento or Sales Cloud by Salesforce or Hybris by SAP and things like that.
Got it. Okay. So just so everyone knows, it's very similar, but just an advanced version where you can create your store in it. Is it payment and processing as well?
You can do payment processing in that platform, yes. So Magento has a bunch of extensions for like Stripe, AuthorizeNet, and a bunch of others, and you can install that extension to, be able to capture transactions.
Okay, so then you went to GM.
I worked at GM for a few years, yes. And after GM, my old boss from Magento, she was working for a healthcare company, and she was looking for someone to come in to help her establish kind of a front end practice there. So she talked to me and asked me to join her working in the healthcare space. So I did that for, I think, 4 years before I actually switched over to being self-employed, which was just over a year ago. So I started a couple of these companies. The company that I have right now, it's not a year-old company. So I actually started this company accidentally before I started to work for Magento. And when I started this company, it's like kind of operated it as a hobby. So this company was a hobby of mine for about 7 or 8 years before I switched to full time.
You're talking about PowerSync.
Yes, we're talking about PowerSync.
Okay. And so you were doing kind of this side hustle while you were going from corporate to all these different jobs.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So tell me about PowerSync. What do you guys do and how did you get that started?
So PowerSync is very different today compared to what it used to be when I just started it. I'll tell you how it started and I can tell you kind of what we do today. I started it, as I mentioned to you, accidentally. So when I worked for that furniture relocation company, I helped them build an e-commerce website using the Magento platform. So, and one of the projects that I also did for them was they used Salesforce CRM. And they asked me to do a basic integration between Magento and Salesforce to make sure like they can capture leads in Salesforce as orders coming in. So very basic. I did that. And the project manager who I was working with, I remember he was asking me, well, can you change this? Can you change this mapping? I want this data to be here. And I remember that I, at one point, got so tired of all of those requests that I said, you know what, like instead of like, I don't want him to ask me doing those very kind of easy things. As a developer, I wanted to do more sophisticated stuff. So I just created a platform like that. In that integration, I gave him the functionality where he can like remap things himself. So build the tool for him to make my job easier and more exciting. And when I left Court, I kind of looked back at that product, and the integration that I created was pretty cool, but it was specific to how that company was using both Magento and Salesforce. And at that point, I knew Magento decently well. I knew a little bit about Salesforce, but I decided to take the knowledge that I kind of accumulated working for that company and create a product which can be used by any merchant. And I knew that Salesforce had other data sets that map to orders and products and customers, and the way that kind of the other company did it, they kind of used it slightly differently. So anyways, the 2 weeks that I had before I joined Magento, I spent those 2 weeks kind of revamping that product, making it super configurable, making it super flexible. And I thought, you know what? I spent 2 weeks doing this. I decided to publish that product into the Magento marketplace. This is where developers like me could sell their extensions. And I said, you know what? If I'll sell one, I'll be very happy. At that point, I didn't even know how much I should charge for my product. I just said, you know what? $500 sounds good enough based on how much time I've invested. So I published it there, and I sold 2 of those products within the first month, which told me that demand for this integration was there. And I started to learn from the merchants who were buying my product, how they were using Magento, how are they using Salesforce, what are some of the best practices, what features I have not even thought about building that they needed. So, and that kind of what spearheaded that solution and started the company for me. So when people started to pay me, I had to figure out, well, how do I actually receive a payment, right? Like I had to open a bank account, I had to set up a EIN number and do a bunch of other things to officially launch the business. And I was doing it on evenings, nights, and weekends because I had a full-time job after the 2 weeks after I created this product. So that's how it whole thing started.
And so
Today,
you were doing your entire time for about like 7 years while you were working a day job.
yes. And I should say that at some point, I think like maybe 2 years into doing it all by myself as a hobby, so to speak, I hit a very first roadblock, which was I had so many questions and requests coming from my customers. And I just did not have enough time to implement all of this stuff that they were asking me. So I needed to scale. So that was like my very first bump, I guess, where I had to figure out how do I grow further. So I ended up hiring a first developer to help me. And I basically started to scale that way. So and there's kind of several things that I learned through that journey is as a developer myself, it was very difficult for me to let go of my baby, so to speak, because the other developer didn't know much about the product. He was still learning, right? But I needed to develop that trust to allow him to build or continue to build those things, which allowed me to focus on other things that I needed to be focused on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And throughout those 7 years, then I hired another developer and so on and so forth. So my team grew while I was still employed, while I was still working for the corporate world, so to speak, working for somebody else. I was like slowly growing this company. And at that point, like again, I did not know how to sell and I did not even try to sell. Like my business essentially grew organically because as people were using it, they were recommending my product to somebody else. So I can say like, again, I have not spent more than I think $1,000 on sales or marketing. It was just all inbound leads, all organic search and stuff like that. So yes.
Wow. That's amazing. Okay, so I do have to ask, you said in the beginning you launched those two integrations and then you kind of wanted to figure out how your customers were using Salesforce and Magento and try to find solutions for them, things that you didn't even think of creating. How did you do that? Did you just send them an email and like survey people? How did you try to figure out more solutions?
That is a great question. So, no, I have not done any surveys, nor did I know that I could do that. So, in a lot of the cases, it was either I got an email from a customer that I already have who said, "Hey, I'm trying to do X. Can your product do it?" And from there, I would say, "Oh, cool idea. No, it can do it, but give me a week and I'll implement it." That was kind of the engagement.
Got
Or there were situations where a customer comes in and says, "Hey, I'm spending a lot of time doing this manually. Can you help me solve this problem?" And by just kind of learning and watching how they do things manually, in some cases, I was able to do exactly what they're asking for, just automating simple things. But in other cases, I was able to say, "Well, you're doing it this way. This other customer of mine is doing it that way." And like through that conversation with multiple people, I was able to figure out, well, what's the easiest and the best thing to do it based on the fact that how other people use the platform. And after a while, I was able to even recommend best practices to my customers who were just getting onboarded.
Wow, that's amazing. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Mhm.
So, Igor, how old were you when you first started PowerSync?
PowerSync officially, that accidental start, I think I was about 30 years old, maybe 30 or 31.
Okay, got it. And so you said 7 or 8 years later down the road, you gave up the corporate career and you decided to do this full time, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so tell me, was there a story behind that decision? Was there something that you just hated in the corporate world, or was it a matter of, wow, this business is really scaling, it's going up, and you saw a bigger vision for PowerSync where you didn't see in the corporate world?
Great question. It's partially some of those, but it's not one or the other. But basically, that 2019 was a very difficult year for me because that was kind of my second scaling milestone that I hit with my business. I was getting quite a lot of installation demand or customization demand from my customers and having a full time job. And we were working on a lot of complex projects during that year. Again, I found myself where I could not take on some of the projects that my customers were asking me to do, even with the development team that I had. And I was even sometimes not even able to follow up on the inbound leads that I was getting. So at that point, I was thinking, my God, like I either need to figure out a way how to fix the problem and continue to this side hustle, or I should potentially maybe even just figure out a way and sell the business because the business was already profitable back then, or just go in and work on it full time. So I'm not gonna lie, like I in 2019 I even tried to see if anybody would buy my business. There
Wow.
were a few interested parties, and like through just verbal conversation, not even pulling any numbers together, I had a few offers on the table, just kind of again verbal offers, nothing concrete. But I think that's when it clicked with me because looking at those numbers and just seeing, my God, if I'm only doing this part time, these folks are interested in the business that I've built. They're willing to pay me this much money. How much can I grow this business if I were to just focus on it full time? And I think at that point, I stopped kind of going the direction of trying to find a way to sell the business. And instead, I started to kind of think through what would it mean if I were to go full time.
Mm,
And at that time, my wife was not working. I have two kids. And I think when I was starting to think about it, my wife kind of said that she was ready to go back to work. So we kind of had to figure out a way for us to say, well, if I were to go full time doing this stuff, just in case stuff happens, I want to make sure that, the family is going to be okay. So that was a very, very tough decision that I had to make with my wife together.
Yeah. So I'm sure it was a bit scary because you were reaching into the unknowns and yet you had a stable paycheck coming in every 2 weeks or every month, however you got paid. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, now it's just me and building this company. I'm sure there was a risk involved and I'm sure there was some sort of scarcity that was playing in your guys' decision. So do you regret making that decision?
No. So in the beginning, when I made that decision, it was scary. And then I kind of went through a few months at my corporate kind of job to kind of trying to close things down, wind things up, prepare the transition and stuff like that. But when I did shift or switch over, all of a sudden I had so much free time that I had another scare where, well, I was busy with my full-time job. Now I have to figure out a way how to fill up my calendar with the stuff that I need to be focused on. And I was worried that I'm not going to be able to do it quickly. But I think it took me about a month to kind of kick it into high gear and then just go from there.
And then blast off.
And I remember when in the first month, I think my wife was like from time to time saying like, well, maybe you should like in parallel go and see maybe there is another corporate job that you want to take. And I was like, well, I wanted to see if this thing is going to go well. And I think after like a first month, she never mentioned it again. And I think like 4 months later, I asked her like, well, remember you asked me this question, how you feel now? And she was like, well, you've already proven yourself. So all good, all good.
Yeah.
That was a great pat on the back and support on her behalf.
Yeah. And so how long did it take your business to start seeing some real traction? And I want to know in the beginning stages and then also when you quit and did this full time.
I never had to seek any investment or anything like that for this business. Whenever it started, I think I only like took $200 out of my own pocket so I can open a bank account. That was the only investment that I made initially. And from there, I didn't have that many expenses since I was kind of working for myself. I didn't have anybody to pay. It was just money coming in from the sales that I was generating. So it was profitable kind of on day one. Now, when I started to hire people, obviously I had to like figure out the whole like, margin, profit, all of that fun stuff. So that was great. But in terms of the real traction, I think when I switched to full time within the first 2 months, I think I had my first record month, and then the second record month, and so on and so forth. So far it's been a wild and a great journey.
Yeah, a lot of record months. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. That's great. So what about mentors? Did you have any mentors that helped you out to start your business?
Whenever I had all of those other failed businesses, so no mentors. With PowerSync, I did not have a mentor per se. I had some people who kind of provided comments early on saying like, hey, you might want to do this. But it wasn't like ongoing, consistent coaching or mentorship, so to speak.
Okay. Got it. So you just did this all by yourself.
Pretty much.
So, and then you also said that you did not do any marketing. Do you guys do any like Facebook ads, Instagram, Google ads, anything like that right now?
Right now, we do Google ads. We tried social ads a little bit last year, but we just haven't figured out a way to make them work. So, what we're kind of focusing on right now is there's so many merchants that we've helped over the years, and I never actually put much effort into documenting and telling those stories. So that's kind of what in the last maybe 3 months ish, we've been kind of documenting all of the potential stories that we can create. And we've been creating those stories essentially today. Like I think we'll launch the first two stories today. So there's going to be much more coming into the pipeline and more kind of case studies that we'll be publishing to tell the stories of other merchants that worked with us. But to me, that content is the most powerful thing that you can do, like compared to the social ads. personally. So I have a very, very good partner who has been helping me from content perspective and marketing perspective. And basically she helped me reposition my website. Now we're showing up on the first page of Google. So it's all organic search. And I think these case studies will be helping as well. And we've been doing also a lot of those interviews on YouTube. So we've been publishing some of those videos of people telling how they feel after they've used our product or used our service.
Okay. And content, are you just talking about like putting out blog posts about your product?
Blog posts about the platforms that we work with or things that we believe can be implemented on those platforms to help merchants continue to grow their business.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay. So that is practically free advertisement.
Right. Well, and to me, since we're talking about sales and marketing and stuff, up until last year, I kind of despised a sales job or anybody who did sales because I've always had negative experience with that. And many salespeople that I spoke with, they were extremely pushy. They did not care of what I needed or what I was saying. So I always had like that negative reaction whenever somebody was talking sales, right? And the way that I kind of approach the sales itself is like you have to provide value, right? Whether or not you want the person to buy your product, to me, that's secondary or tertiary in that conversation. So the very first thing that I'm trying to figure out is what is the actual problem that person is dealing with? One, two, can I help him solve that problem, or potentially can I help him point him in the right direction where that person will get closer to that solution, right? And if you provide that value, all of a sudden, those people look at you and your product very differently.
Mm, got it. Yeah. So you are being very informative. You're providing that educational piece
Mhm.
and essentially providing an enormous amount of value through your blog post by educating customers, right?
I hope so. I hope I'm providing enormous amount of value.
Yeah. And so, who are your major clients, or say, are these business owners? Are they big corporations? Who do you guys normally serve?
Great question. So these days, the Magento e-commerce platform, typically it's a sophisticated platform. So you need a system integrator or a developer to help you implement it. So it does cost more money than like Shopify, for example, right? Salesforce is also not a very cheap product. And since our initial core product offering was Magento Salesforce integration, we kind of positioned ourselves in a way where we worked with more medium to enterprise level businesses. And through the 9 years of doing this or selling this product, we've developed some other products in there, but that's a separate story. But we now have customers in 18 countries around the world. So, and they're typically like larger, medium sized corporations.
So, for example, like a shoe store can have your integration because they're doing online sales.
Pretty much, yes. So think of it as like anybody who has an online store, right? A big, big online store.
Mhm.
And when I say big, like I mean enterprise, not like how many SKUs or products they sell, right? It
Nike or Zappos.
could be, right? Anyways, so whoever has an online store, let's say they're using Magento e-commerce platform, our product becomes critical for them because in the last several years, like in this space has been shifting towards customer focused, right? And the CRM, it's a customer relationship management system. That system gives you the ability to track all your customer engagement in one platform, regardless of your sales channel. Like one sales channel can be Magento website, right? Another sales channel could be Amazon storefront, or you could be selling through printed material, right? Things like that, or over the phone. So CRM kind of ties all of that customer engagement in one place. And it helps you build proper reporting. You can have teams that can react to certain customer actions and stuff like that. So when you're tying your e-commerce platform to a CRM, you're essentially positioning yourself extremely well compared to all of your other competition who may not be even doing it today. We do have a YouTube video where one of our customers is saying, like, after they've implemented our product, they were using both systems and they were manually moving the data. But after we implemented our product, we not only helped them save, I think it was like we've calculated tens of thousands of hours in a year. But within our product, we also have an abandoned cart feature, which all of a sudden, like if somebody looking for products, adding them to the shopping cart, but decided not to check out for whatever reason, all of that data essentially is transferred to Salesforce, and their sales team can identify those abandoned carts and react to them, calling those customers or offering them special coupon codes, trying to kind of convert that sale, right? And that customer said that we helped them generate tens of thousands of dollars a year just by implementing our solution. And those are the money that they didn't even know that they were losing.
Ah, so it was you behind all those emails that I've been getting. Hey, you left this in your cart.
Well, we do data synchronization. We don't send emails specifically, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All this time, I'm like, wow, that is really creepy. How did they know it was me? Now
Mhm.
I see where this genius product is coming from. Okay, so Igor, first of all, wow, what amazing genius product linking all of those amazing solutions together. One stop shop for really big and medium sized companies, saving them money and hours. Amazing, amazing work. So good job. I did want to ask you, I'm really interested to know, how do you look at failures and how do you overcome them?
I always look at failures as a way to learn. I'm an optimist by life, so even if I mess something up, I still try to kind of make something positive out of it. And whenever you fail, obviously, like just look all of those other businesses that I tried to start, right? Like I consider those being failures, but good failures because each business taught me something, or each startup taught me something. And I've developed this kind of mindset where I'm okay if I fail because I know two things. If I fail, I will learn from that experience and get stronger in the future and just simply just get back up and keep going forward, right? And I believe that nobody is perfect and nobody knows everything. So you have to be comfortable failing, and you just gotta don't focus on the negative, focus on the positive. What did that experience teach you? What can you improve, and how can you do it better next time?
Mm, so powerful. Wow. Such invaluable advice. Thank you. So let's switch gears and talk about successes. Are there any successes that you would like to outline from your immigrant entrepreneur journey?
Successes, right? So I learned English. No, I'm just kidding. Uh, like within the business world, I think I've mentioned this already, but kind of having this side hustle for many years, not working on it full time. But before I even went to work full time, at that point, I already had customers in 17 countries around the world. So to me, that's a huge achievement. Last year, we added Japan to the list. I want to continue going down that path and then continuing to increase the number of merchants that we support in various countries. Another success that I consider is all the customers, and I truly mean all the customers that we work with and sell our products to, they tell us that we have the best customer experience that they've ever seen within the Magento development community. And they keep coming back asking us to help them with more stuff. And this is kind of where my business took a turn last year when I started to work full time. Before, I wasn't really taking too much or putting too much emphasis on doing professional services for my customers. And I've basically developed this professional services arm of the business where now I can easily say to a merchant who is coming to us saying, I need your help to fix something outside of your product or develop a new feature or something like that. I can tell them, absolutely, we can do it.
And it's more like a consulting
Ab-
services or
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Custom development, consulting. Mhm.
so what makes you guys set apart? You mentioned the customer service and customer relationships. How did you think that you developed that and what makes it different from anyone else?
We're extremely responsive when it comes to incoming requests. Like we usually, when people have questions or have problems, even, right? They call you or they send you an email. And the feedback that I'm getting from a lot of our customers who use competitive products, they say that it's impossible to get a hold of the company who developed the product that they used for before.
Mhm.
Where when they work with us, they send us an email or they call us, we basically pick up the phone or email them within the first couple of minutes or within an hour, depending, right? Depending on the problem. So we're extremely responsive, and that's how we approach our sales, demos, post sales, support of the product, and stuff like that. Mhm.
So, Igor, what does the American dream mean to you?
Right now, it means nothing. It's just a dream. But it's kind of interesting, the whole phrase American dream, I think it's kind of like a perception that was built in my mind when I lived in Russia, when I was growing up in Russia. And I think that perception was built based on some of the shows or things like American shows that were airing in Russia that everyone watched.
Mhm.
And I think if I remember correctly, if you were asking me like, what is the American dream? If I still lived in Russia, I probably would have told you, well, it's a big house, somewhere on the beach, expensive cars, a lot of parties and friends and stuff like that, right? But that perception has drastically changed now that I'm here and maybe after I've grown up. And to me, it's just a dream, right? Like everybody has dreams, hopefully. And if you don't, you should dream big and keep kind of going down that path. I think when you do dream, just need to make sure that you don't always set achievable goals because those are easy to achieve, but set unachievable goals because that's what's going to keep you pushing forward and allow you to kind of reach for stars and actually get them.
Mm, yeah, so powerful. Wow. And can anyone achieve their American dream?
I think so. Can anybody achieve their dream? Absolutely. For example, if you're hungry, right? Just a little bit hungry, and you're not going to always go and try to find food, like the likelihood of you finding food is going to be very little, right? But if you're like starving, you desperately need it, you will find ways to get to your goal, right? And to me, like when you think about the business or working on the business with the business, it's the same way, right? Like, how bad do you want this thing to work and grow and be the best thing that out there? That is what's going to control how fast you will get to that goal. And obviously, that is kind of an answer to your question is if you want it bad enough, you can always achieve your dream or get to your dream.
Yes, so true. It reminds me of a quote that Miles Monroe always says, you have to be hungry. And he says it so loud with a passion because if you're not hungry and you're just doing it, half awake with one foot in, then you probably are never going to get there. I mean, like you were doing this side hustle for a really, really long time. But then when you did it full time, you put all your full energy and drive into it. I'm assuming that's when you started seeing all those monthly goals, monthly growth every single month and saw some substantial successes, right?
Absolutely. And I'll even say this like, I think the biggest mistake that a lot of entrepreneurs can make, and some of them even make, is that I believe that they waste their time on things that don't matter or don't help them get closer to their dream. Right. Like, I mean, like, just to take TV as an example, right? Like, a lot of people watch TV, but in reality, does TV or watching a show get you closer to your dream? No, then to me, it's a waste of time.
Yes, so true. Thank you. So, Igor, is giving back either volunteering time or giving back to the community something that is part of your business values?
It is. And I'll be honest, before it wasn't when I was kind of doing it as a side hustle. But since I switched to working on my business full time, I did start to volunteer my time to help merchants in need. And it was kind of timely too, because I basically transitioned to working on PowerSync full time right before COVID started, like a couple of months before. And when COVID hit, a lot of businesses were impacted. Many businesses had to furlough people, right? Like after a few months in. And at that point, they needed to, their leadership was asking them to do the same things that they were doing before with less people. Or businesses that did not have an online presence, right? Like I think early on, you couldn't even go to the store. Everyone was afraid, right? So people started to shop online. And if you didn't have a good online presence, your business struggled, right? So, talking about volunteering, I basically last year started to volunteer my time to help those merchants in need who were impacted by COVID. And I started to offer free strategy sessions to those merchants to help them figure out a way how to survive this pandemic.
Wow, what a unique service that you can provide during COVID and provide your expertise in such a special way. So that's amazing. So, what are some things you would advise the next aspiring immigrant that wants to start their own business listening to you right now?
Get off your ass and start it.
And then we can drop the mic.
That's right. No, but I mean, like in reality, we often procrastinate too much whenever we think about it. And like, I mean, I procrastinated too much even within like when I started PowerSync. Like I should have just went and did it full time early on. And one can argue, right? Like I definitely did get a lot of good experience working for the corporate world, which helps me run my business better. But I wonder if those were the learnings that I could have gotten faster working for myself. But to me, it's like if you don't try, you will never know, right? And the biggest thing that I will say is, so let's say you decided to start a business. Great, go for it. Just make sure you keep your calendar full on things that actually matter that will help you grow. And don't procrastinate, and make sure you surround yourself with people who've achieved some of those goals that you're trying to hit, because you'll be learning from them. And they're the people that will help you get there faster. And you want to make sure that those people that you're learning from can also be your advocates, right? Because if people believe in you, they will push you. They will ask you to do things that you may not want to do all if you're kind of thinking or trying to do it all by yourself.
And your story reminds me of the 7 Up company. So I think some guy started a soda company. He called it 5 Up and it completely failed miserably. And then he shut it down. And then he started 6 Up with, I guess, different formulas and different strategies. And it failed miserably and he gave up. Well, then someone else came into the market and called the soda 7 Up. And we all know what happened then.
Right.
So to pursue and to continue with the different passions, the different fields, and to never give up like you did. You know, you started several different companies and some of them a dating website and then a web design and then the other companies that you had, but then you still kept on going and going with your entrepreneurial drive. And then here we are, you're doing amazing work. So that's awesome. Igor, thank you so much. This is an amazing journey. And I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on to the Immigrant Entrepreneurs Podcast. You're such an inspiration to so many different immigrants to continue pursuing their dreams and their passions. I truly appreciate your time and I wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you so much for having me. This was an amazing conversation. Thank you for listening to my life journey. Hopefully it will teach somebody how to not make some of the mistakes that I make, or maybe even inspire people to actually get off the couch and start a business, which could essentially become a multi-billion-dollar business someday. So,
yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. If there are any links that were mentioned in this episode, make sure to check them out on my website under this episode to find all the links conveniently located in the show notes. I just wanted to ask for a quick favor. If you could please leave a review wherever you're at listening to this podcast. Also, if you're an immigrant entrepreneur and would love to be on my podcast, please email me and we'll get connected. I'll see you guys all next time for another exciting and impactful episode. Take care.